So good morning. Well, my name is Gordon Toevs. I am out of the Washington office, and so I am the National Coordinator for the Assessment, Inventory, and Monitoring Strategy. So first of all, I'm really pleased to see so many people here. I'm sorry there are not enough seats for everybody, but I hope that throughout the day people will get to peek in and observe some of these presentations. So rather than a peculiar topic to start my discussion, but Emily has told us how the strategy, the components of the strategy. I'm going to start after this initial slide about how we got here. But Sage-Grouse and solar really conflicting uses. Now, there's not much solar in Sage-Grouse area, but if you took solar, really a single use of a landscape, and you take Sage-Grouse, which is another use of the landscape that really restricts uses, and how do we begin to understand that in the context of multiple use and sustained yield? None of this is easy, and we are continuing to learn from what we do, but it is complicated. And so hopefully as I go through here and set the stage for a number of the really great presentations that we're going to see today, you will understand the complexity of the issues we are looking at and why it is important that we do have some data that we can scale from that site all the way up to the national look of rangelands. So I'm going to step back and how we got here. We just didn't dream this up because we thought that this was something that sounded like a good idea. If we go clear back to FLPMA, which is our organic statute, there are a number of things in there that we are required to do. So we have this periodic and systematic inventory. We have use projected through a coordinated planning. We have goals and objectives based on multiple use and sustained yield. We manage in a manner to protect values and provide services. Then it talks about this inventory a bit. Maintain it. It needs to include resources and values. It needs to be kept current. It needs to reflect changes. It needs to identify new and emerging resources and values. All of these things are very difficult to do if we look at a single plot of land across the nation. So again, the challenge was is how do we begin to coordinate these efforts so that they are meaningful and that they are something that the Bureau can actually accomplish. The planning portion of FLPMA, I used a systematic interdisciplinary approach. Priorities, designated and protected resources, and here this is where Sage-Grouse fits into this picture very well. Consider present and potential uses. So when FLPMA was written, solar industry was not even thought beyond house, and here this is one of these potential uses. Consider relative scarcity and available alternatives, weigh long-term and short-term benefits. Again, all big challenges for the Bureau to try to sort through. And then there's this administration section of FLPMA. Manage under principles of multiple use and sustained yield. Manage mining based on an 1872 mining law. Prevent undue and unnecessary degradation. These are all really big, complicated principles. So the first step of trying to sort this out, and this is a very abbreviated talk in 20 minutes of this, and so hopefully less than that, so you can ask some questions. But the first step of that was to figure out what does that mean to manage rangeland. And so the National Academy of Sciences, the National Research Council organized a group of people led by Steve Busby, and in the intro it says, we are hampered in the ability to make decisions because of inability to answer questions about the condition or quality of our rangeland. This is 1994. So when we talk about collecting data at site scale and putting it in boxes, big problem in 94, it continues to be a big problem today, and so that's part of the idea here is to address this issue. So through this collaborative group, they establish criteria. So they talk about soil stability and watershed function, nutrient cycle and energy flow, presence of recovery mechanisms. And then they said, you need to cooperate. So the committee offers it, so this was the charge from this book. So the committee offers this committee that authored this book, offers it to the profession of rangeland management and to society as a whole with this challenge. Test it and change it, but do it in the same cooperative manner that this committee used to produce the strategy recommended in this report. I think that's an outstanding statement. And I hope that 50 years from now, somebody can pick a piece out of some of these AIM documents that we're writing and say, wow, they really nailed it. Because I think this is a great statement. And so throughout this process of developing the strategy, it has definitely been interagency and with our partners. And so we have really taken this charge, and you will see that today in the presentation. There are a lot of different agencies that are presenting today, and we appreciate their participation in making this a program that is across all rangelands. So from that, the report, we developed our federal regulations, which then adopted those criteria from the rangelands report. So watershed, uplands, and riparian, and aquatic are in properly functioning physical condition, ecological processes supporting healthy biota, water quality complies with state standards, habitats remain for threatened and endangered species. Now, does anybody have any idea how you measure any of that stuff? This is a serious problem, but it's a big charge, and it makes sense. And so then the next step was to look at indicators and measurements. So how are we actually going to begin to design tools to help us understand? So this document, the Interpreting Indicators of Rangeland Health, which is continues to be in wide use today as it ended currently under additional revision, looks at the attributes of soil site stability, hydrologic function, biotic integrity. It has qualitative and quantitative indicators and selective measurement techniques. Another quote from the '94 publication, the evaluation of rangeland health will require judgments on the significance and meaning of the indicators that are measured. Evaluation of the preponderance of evidence from the evaluation of multiple indicators will be required for a meaningful assessment of rangeland health. We are dealing with complex systems. This is not a cookbook approach. It requires skills, it requires an interdisciplinary report, and it requires judgment. So I would be disappointed if people left this today thinking that we are going to have a cookbook approach that says, oh, this is good, this is bad, this needs to change. So this requires professional judgment, and it really is an art of rangeland management. However, the art of rangeland management is should have some quantitative underpinning. And so that is what we are working on. So from there, we went to this consistent information. So how do we begin to measure those quantitative indicators? And so as Emily mentioned a minute ago, we developed this technical note on 440. So the focus of my talk is really about policy and how we are implementing the things that we are doing. And so if people want these technical notes, they are all publicly available. Just go onto any Google or any engine, search engine, and type in terrestrial core indicators. These documents will come up. And so these are all publicly available. We certainly encourage your use and query of them. So the next thing is this consistent information about aquatic. So this publication is not complete yet. It is in final layout, but again, talks about consistent information that we have worked with our partners to develop so that we can share information and produce maps that talk about range-wide conditions. Special status species, another publication that is just about to come out, the Sage-Grouse Habitat Assessment Framework. So if I can just take you back for a minute as we talked about those fundamentals, we have the terrestrial, we have the riparian and aquatic, we have the special status species, and we have the water quality. Here we're getting into those special status species, and so this is one that you would add if Sage grouse are in your area. They're obviously not going to be following this if you're in the desert tortoise area, but this is an example of supplemental indicators that you would add if necessary, or additional protocol that you would adopt if you need this to understand if you're meeting those fundamentals of rangeland health. The really nice thing about this document is it is one of our first approaches at multiple scale indicators. So there are indicators in this document for 4 scales. The site scale, which you could say that's where the nest is. That the fine scale, which is where the seasonal, where the birds, the seasonal habitats that these birds are going to be using. There is that next scale, the broad scale, which is the population of birds that have similar genetic and migratory or stationary patterns. And then there's the range wide. So as we look at these scales, we don't want to be developing a monitoring program for every new thing that comes down the road, because there are going to be plenty of species that we have issues with. There are going to be plenty of uses that we have issues with, whether it be solar or whether it be wind or whatever the other uses that are going to be coming along. So this one, these site scale indicators, most of them, probably 98% of them, are derived from the core indicators and methods. So it is an idea of we are not developing new methods and techniques. We're taking the data we are collecting and we're driving the indicator values that are important for the management issue at hand. And so that's one of those things that is really, as Emily mentioned, collect once, use many times. This is a great example of that, as those site scale indicators inform the broad and the fine scale questions. And then with the integration of remote imagery, now suddenly we take those indicators and they are used even at the range-wide scale. So the 5 principles of AIM that Emily mentioned, here are another tech note that you can query, tech note 445, and Emily went through these 5 principles of AIM, but again, available online, and we encourage you to download these documents. The beginning to implement the AIM strategy in a very major effort that we are undergoing right now, which is the GRSD planning strategy. We are amending or replacing 90-plus land use plans. This document implements the core indicators, the quantitative measures for land health assessment, and the evaluation of meeting rangeland standards, including the use of those core indicators in the habitat assessment framework. It integrates remote imagery. It implements a data management plan, and it truly is providing information for adaptive management. So a major focus right now is understanding how we're going to implement these plans. It's not just about policy. And we have a chart over here, and we already mentioned this. We can develop all the policy we want. If we can't make it useful for the field and useful for the society that we are providing this information to, it's a problem. And so today you're going to see many presentations about using this data. So you're going to see presentations about the integration of remote imagery. You're going to see presentations about terrestrial broad-scale assessment, about aquatic broad-scale assessment. You're going to see something about special status species. And we're going to see, I don't know if we're specifically going to see this, but this is another project that we worked on extensively about understanding localized impacts and the condition of single use. And so this was our work with the solar energy zone in Dry Lake, developing a monitoring plan for actually where the installations will occur, and then a monitoring plan for where we're going to do the mitigation activities and the effectiveness of those mitigation activities. So I think that as you look across the Bureau and the activities, we have addressed virtually every scale, from that allotment scale to the broadest scale, using AIM data. So we do have good examples that you are going to have the privilege of seeing today. We really do want to be providing information for informed decision making. So we appreciate your attendance. We hope you find the day informative. I personally want to thank the presenters. There's a bunch of them here, and I do appreciate that. And I really want to thank the National Operations Center, the BLM National Operations Center. They just do a tremendous amount of work to make this happen. And so I would like to call them out as far as their contribution to this effort. So again, thank you, especially to our partners and those of you who have participated in making this a reality. So I appreciate that very much. And I don't know if there's time for questions or. All right, they didn't have to use that stop sign on me. So anyway, if people have questions, I'd sure be happy to answer them. Sure.
Question that has been raised is if we're spending our resources collectively and we located data, then will we also have other monitoring that might be necessary for certain acts?
So repeating that question, and I didn't pay Sherm to ask this question, but I do appreciate it. So Sherm was wondering about the use of key areas and how we develop the capacity within the Bureau to do both of those, or if we are going to sacrifice one for the other. Did I characterize that correctly, Sherm? Okay. So, so I really appreciate that question, because what we are talking about with the broad scale and using this information at the broad scale is to go back and meet that fundamental principle of inventorying and the condition and making sure that it is current. So at the broadest scale, that's why we need this statistically valid sampling design and those points across the landscape. That is not about use. We have a lot of uses. And just as I brought up this map here, that is a use. And those data points are established to understand the impact of that use on that landscape. Grazing is a use. It's a diffuse use, but it's a use. And those key points, if they are correctly located, indicate use. So then the integration of this that we need to talk about is, if we understand the condition of the land at these broader scales, how is that use impacting that condition? And is it a causal factor or not? And so that is where those key sites or those areas where you think represent some average use of that condition or of that authorization occur. This is not intended to replace those. We need to be making sure that when we authorize a use, we are making sure that that use is complying with the terms and conditions of those permits. So use monitoring and condition monitoring, and yes, we need to make sure that we are using them in concert with each other, but at this point, I don't see how one can replace these.
Second part of Sherm's question.
Oh, yeah, all right, now okay, thank you. So there is no dream that this can happen without additional capacity. And so we have had great support from OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, to understand how we were going to implement this. So they were the ones that really initiated this entire effort. They have been very, very helpful, and we have a number of budget proposals that are going forward to do this. So this is not anything that we expect to be implemented within existing capacity.
So the capacity question might be, we got to add resources to actually get some area-based monitoring. And you talk about additional capacity to those things, not for saving and using them that have traditionally been funded out.
So that question is about we haven't had the money to fund the traditional programs to monitor use. How can we then add additional capacity and not address this issue? I can't, first of all, I don't have the authority, but second of all, I don't know that I can change the Bureau in a day, but we're working on it. But I think that one of the problems with our existing capacity is that we have relegated, in general, I'm talking about generalities, so please don't, I mean, somebody's welcome to pick on me at any time. But in general, we have relegated rangeland health to the grazing program, which is completely inappropriate. Rangeland health is about the condition of the lands we manage. If we have interdisciplinary teams, as I mentioned at the beginning, providing data to understand the condition of the lands we manage, the range program, in my humble opinion, wouldn't be in the shape it's in. And so that's all part of this, is how do we begin to integrate the other programs within the Bureau so that they are part of that setting the stage for those authorizations for permit renewals. And so that's really the lift that we would like to see as we move forward, is taking that responsibility off of the grazing program so the grazing program can really worry about permit renewals and understanding the impacts that grazing has on the land that they use. So that's a great questions, and I do really appreciate that, and hopefully that sheds some light on how I see this working into being a coordinated effort. Sarah says I'm done. That means I'm done. So thank you all very much.